This is the demo for the behaviors implemented as part of the Hello World assignment. I've implemented two types of requests. One is a get method based request and a post method based request. Both of them are using the hello route. And on the server, a handler is hooked onto this hello route to generate the logic required to process and output the response. Let's start with the get hello request, and as you can see, I'm using query parameters, and I've got 3 parameters which I'm dispatching, so there's some level of customization of the response. So by default, if I send the name, which is in fact a short name, then there is an F name, full name and last name. And if I send it to the server, let me just start the server. So here I'm starting the server, and I'm using the same code scaffolded from the courseware. So it's actually listening on both. It's got an HTTPS instance as an HTTP instance. On Postman, incidentally, I'm using the HTTPS instance, so I'm just dispatching this request, and as you can see, it responded with a hello message with the first name and last name of the person. If I am avoiding these 2 parameters or any one of which, then I should get the short name used in the response. If I let's say, so both cases you can see here, if I am avoiding all the parameters and just querying it, I should get a hello world response. Now if you look at on the server console, you can actually see that it's outputting what the parameters received by the server in the handler and the response message generated by the handler. Now I will show the post based method. In post, I am using by convention sending the data as a payload in the body, and I'm using 2 type of encoding. One is type of content. One is obviously a form URL encoded variant, as well as a multi-part document variant which uses form data as the disposition. So let's try with when I'm sending using form URL encoded. So you can actually see it sets the content type to form URL encoded, and in the body it's dispatching these values. So let's just send it to the server and see what happens. So again, as you can see, behavior is the same as in the get method. The only difference is there are more parameters here, and the parameters is being sent as a URL encoded. On the server, you can see it has received all the parameters and responded with the appropriate logic in the handler. If if I don't refuse to send some of these non-mandatory parameters, then it won't be received by the server, but the response will be the same. And just as in the get method, if I avoid any one of these or both of these, it will send a short name based response. I'll move on to the form data based content. So here again, I'm using a multi-part document. I'm sending a multi-part document, and let's dispatch this and see what happens. You can see that it's the same behavior. On the server, you can see it is receiving all the data, parsing all the data and receiving all the data, and then processing it to generate the response. If I don't send any data, the default behavior ensures you get the hello world. There is no parameters received. As it is showing in the output, it's just that it defaults to the value world in the name, so you're getting that. So this is the behavior implemented in the system to demonstrate how a hello world handler, my interpretation of the hello world handler. Now we will get into the implementation and the code logic for the behaviors I've demoed. So obviously the first important aspect is the implementation of a handler on the server against the route hello. So you have the route hello. So if you look at the route, this is the hello route, and when the server receives the hello route, it resolves to this handler. So this handler will be called if the route is hello. So that this line of code is
giving that binding. Then you go to the handler itself, and as you can see, the handler is defined as something which can parse query parameters if using the get method. So if this handler is called using the get method, then it will expect some query parameters, custom query parameters in the call, which is what you're seeing here. So if you look at the hello this thing, you can see that these query parameters are part of the query string. Or if you're using post method, then it expects form data, which results in a customized hello message. So that means hello message will not be just hello world, it will be a message which can be customized based on what we are sending in the request. If you're sending query parameters, it will respect those query parameters and do that. So first line is obviously resolving what is the method. So to start with, we'll have to look at the signature of this handler, which is by convention based on the scaffolding code I have received on the courseware. You have to write this thing with two parameters. One is two arguments basically. One is data and other is callback. The data is nothing but a data object which is extracted and which consists of attributes that is relevant to what we need to process. So here the data object is there already. So you can see it is having some standard objects. One is the path component of the URL query. This is the query component of the URL. This is the method and the headers and the payload. That is if there is any payload. If there has been any data sent in the body of that call, then that will be written as a string into the payload. Right? It's decoded and written into the payload. So in the handler, you're receiving this data object. The second argument is the callback. Callback is nothing but this is the typical pattern in Node. So you're passing a callback in order, because Node is based on a callback, an observable kind of pattern, if you could say, wherein which if once a method is called, the control will pass on asynchronously on to the next task and the next task. The server is running in only one thread. So you cannot hold or lock up the entire server, the thread, by waiting for a return for a particular method. So the pattern is a callback pattern. It's a callback chain in Node. So going with that concept, we have a callback object, which is nothing but a function object which is sent to you. And you can make the call to that callback object signifying the end of a particular function. So once this function is called, this handler is logged in, it will, or is called, executed, the server can go on servicing other requests because it is not locked up. So this kind of a mechanism is built into Flow, and therefore in Node it is customary to pass a callback in a function, or maybe a promise or something. You know, if you're using a promise library, you can use the promise pattern to do that. So the callback object is coming in, which is nothing but a function. So this is important, the signature. So that signature is typical of every handler that we need to write. Then you have the code in the handler. What is of interest here is obviously method is resolved. I need to know what is the method being called, because then only I know whether it's a get or post. Then I'm initializing a data access object called parambag, and the parameters being sent in from the remote client is stored into this parambag. It is parsed or resolved and stored into this parambag. That's the logic you're going to see. To start with, there is a name attribute which is de facto required. So that name attribute will be set to world, because if none is passed from here, let's say if I switch off every parameter and sends none, there is no parameter, then it should respond with hello world. You can see that if I do that, it is actually responding with hello world. If I switch on, say, both the components of the full name, then it will use that full name. So that behavior is initialized here, and this is the same. That logic is embedded in a getter called hello name. So that getter is also attached to the parambag object. So once that is done, so this kind of encapsulates that logic. Now I have a switch condition for solving the method. So if it is a get, then what I am doing is a straightforward assuming that only these parameters are possible in a getter. I am not assuming any other parameters. So I am just retrieving it in the query string object. So as explained, the query string object should contain the value sent in this call. This entire query, this is the query string, right? And the query string object will contain each of these key values as attributes on it. So you have f name, l name, and name, and I'm setting it, and then I'm coming here and calling back. The execution will jump to this point. I'll output the content. So that is why you saw the output, the content. This line is console output. What exactly is there in the param-back at that time? And this is the call, the callback. In the callback, I am calling this hello name getter to construct the message attribute of that JSON packet I am sending backwards. So that JSON payload is attached into the callback, and this is the exact callback that is being dispatched. That is why I have got a status 200 here with the exact callback. So that logic is here, right? Now the next step is, okay, suppose if it is a post method is coming, then it becomes a bit more complicated. Now, in keeping with the spirit of not using any other third-party library or helper utility libraries, I am processing the contents being sent from the form post as form contents. And there are two modalities. One is obviously the URL encoded form. So you can see that I can either send it as form URL encoded as form data. So the form URL encoded, if you're sending, it's pretty straightforward. You know that you can see that the contents that is dispatched will be in the body, and sorry, give me a second. Form URL encoded. If I look at it, it's nothing but a URL. It's just like the query string, encoded exactly like the query string with the ampersand and equals to. So you have name is equal to Raj, F name is equal to Rajendra, Patra, location is equal to India. So that's exactly what I'm sending here. This parsing logic is a very simplified parsing logic where it splits using the ampersand, creating each element, and the element is again further split to get the key values, and that is set into the param-back. You can see that the param-back attribute is set, which the name is receiving the key value, and that is exactly you're finding in the param-back. You're saying name Raj, F name, location India, and the output in the console. So this is one modality where you have a few form URL encoded. Second modality or type, content type I'm using is multi-part form data. If I'm sending it as a multi-part form data, then obviously you're going to have the body consisting of something like this. Obviously this is something is wrong with this, but it's easy to understand. At least one segment if you take, you can see that there is a form boundary, right? This form boundary string, whatever is the form boundary string, this string has to be extracted. So that is what I'm extracting from the content type declaration in the header. Okay, and then that boundary is used to split the payload. Payload is obviously the object, right? Whatever is the this entire string will be there in the payload. So I'm using that to split, and then each element will be, or each element is determined by the boundary. So I'm splitting that along the boundary lines. So I'll get each element. So this is one element, this is another element, and so on and so forth. This is another element, so on and so forth. So that element is picked up. Then I check for that disposition declaration here. So there is a content disposition tag here, header tag here. That content disposition will say if it is a form data, I am interested in it. So that is why I am checking if the disposition is form data. Then that element type is of disposition type form, disposition form data. Then I split that element. The content part of the element is retrieved, right? So I am retrieving this part, that part I am retrieving. Once I retrieve that part of the element, it is split further, because one is I needed the name key. So this name is equal to signifies what attribute I need to extract. the body of that disposition, in this case the form data, will be the value of this attribute. So f name, the value will be Virendra. I am interested in only in f name and Virendra, or name and Viren, right? So that exactly is the processing going on here. I am fetching that too, and once that is processed, that is exactly what I am receiving. So if I am dispatching this this call as a form data, this is getting, and that's what you saw here. So the param consists of these properties, these attributes, and the logic executes as well. So this summarizes all the logic required that is being executed right now to show you the response message. This is my implementation of the handler. Thank you.